the knife edge pass. In this video, we'll cover the knife edge pass from the number 6 opposing solo perspective. This maneuver is fairly straightforward and will be relatively easy to learn even for an inexperienced pilot. It is also the foundation for the entire solo sequence, and you will notice that the solo maneuvers build in complexity from this basic starting point. Because of this, we'll spend a little extra time in this video explaining the setup for this maneuver. For every opposed maneuver, number 6's responsibility as the opposing solo is to hit your marks consistently on the inbound so that number 5 can set up a good hit on center point. During the maneuver itself, you are also responsible to make sure the vertical offset during the hit is right so that it creates the right overlapping picture from the ground. So, number 5 is responsible for timing. Number 6 is responsible for spacing, but each pilot must fly a consistent and correct profile in order to help the other pilot do their job and make the maneuver look perfect. Briefing. The knife edge pass maneuver starts with what we call an abeam setup. After clearing from the section takeoff maneuver, number 6 will be flying parallel to center line on the crowd right heading, meaning away from center point and right relative to crowd, and slightly behind the crowd at roughly 3,000 feet AGL, like we see here. At 4 nautical miles, number 6 will turn 90 degrees to the front of crowd heading. This is the start of the abeam setup because we are now flying abeam the showbox and perpendicular to the show line. This starting point and the following ingress to the showbox will be the same for every maneuver that starts with this setup. We'll unpause and watch the roll-in. Okay. So now that we're abeam, there are a series of radio calls between the two solo pilots to establish relative position and timing, and I'll go over those in more detail in the walkthrough portion of the video. After the final radio call from number 5, which is stand by market, both pilots will turn in for center point. The objective from here on in is to fly 400 knots all the way in from the 4 nautical mile mark to center point. This equates to roughly 10 seconds for every mile, which means that the entire maneuver, from when we turn in to when we clear the showbox following the maneuver, will last approximately 1 minute. This is important for timing with a diamond, and even though you may not be flying with one, it's important to learn. As you ingress, you will call your distance and your speed at each mile so that number 5 knows where he is relative to you on the way in. The more consistent you are, the easier it will be for number 5 to make the timing work for a good hit at center point. Let's pause and discuss the hit. The actual maneuver consists of the 2 solo jets passing center point on the left knife edge, which means rolled 90 degrees with their left wing down. This ensures that both pilots maintain sight of the opposing aircraft throughout the maneuver. The maneuver is then completed with a standard solo clear in front of the crowd, which I'll cover in more detail during the walkthrough next. When performed correctly, both aircraft will appear to pass through one another nose to nose on center point, with the full planform of the jet in view. When you nail it, it always gets a good reaction from the crowd and is a great way to warm things up. Before getting into the specifics of the knife edge pass maneuver, let's talk a little bit about the airspace you're going to be flying in during the airshow. This is a page from the 2023 Blue Angels FAA-approved Maneuvers Manual, and it defines exactly the airspace that a Blue Angels Airshow will occupy. In the very middle, there's a point called the center point, and that's a spot on the ground from which all other show distances will radiate. Running through center point and perpendicular to the crowd's viewpoint is the center line. And along the center line are markers at the 1, 2, 3 nautical mile distances along particular headings that are important for the show itself. From center point toward crowd is a line that is marked as 1,200 feet, and then behind that another line at 1,500 feet, which is the crowd line. The crowd line is the spot where spectators can come no closer to center point than that 1,500-foot distance. And the 1,200-foot distance means that show crew members can come no closer to center point than that distance. And then there's also another line 1,500 feet away from crowd beyond center point that also marks a distance where no one is allowed to go on the ground for safety reasons. So to the right of crowd and to the left of crowd, 1 mile, and then 1,500 feet from center point in both directions is the show box on the ground. But we're also flying airplanes, and airplanes go up and down. So that means that there is an additional z-axis that we have to consider, and the show box is 10,000 feet tall. So there is a piece of sky that is 2 miles wide, 3,000 feet deep, and 2 miles tall that is the show box. This is another page from the maneuvers manual, and it defines all the different headings that are important during the show. There also count as ingress and egress routes for different maneuvers. Most of the maneuvers we'll be flying in the solo profile happen along the show line, but some of them come in from different angles, and our clears are typically along those 30-degree radials. For this maneuver that we're about to perform, the knife edge pass, we're going to do a standard clear crowd left, which means that we're going to be interested in this radial. Now, crowd left heading for the show we're flying right now, which is at Kobuleti Airfield on the Caucasus map, is 064 degrees. And if we are going to do an offset clear angle of 30 degrees, then that means that the angle we're looking for our clear will be 094 degrees. Okay, let's get back to the maneuver itself. Walkthrough. All right, so here we are in the cockpit of our F-18C Hornet in DCS world, and I'm going to walk through the details of all of the portions of the knife edge maneuver from inside the cockpit. Almost everything that you need to know will be contained on the HUD here in the center, but I do have things set up on my MFDs to help me find things that I need depending on what's going on elsewhere in the maneuvers. We've got the HSI here on the left MFD, and repeater HUD on the right MFD. HSI for situational awareness, and repeater HUD for if things get too bright in the HUD in front of me and I need another source of the same information. All the information that we really need, though, is on the HUD, so we'll work from right to left. Starts with distance from center point. We're using a waypoint designation method, and that also puts it on our helmet mounted cueing device, and so we use that to be able to get a better visual reference for center point because we don't have the full fidelity of the real Mark I eyeball in DCS. We have to depend on 1080p or better resolution, but even then it's not as good as the actual human eyeball. And then we also don't have some of the aids that the real pilots do with some of the different things that the crew set up for center point and signal lights and things like that to help them find center point. So we use the helmet mounted display for that. So this is the distance we have from center point here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Up here we have our altitude. That's going to be important for a lot of different maneuvers as well. And then the heading tape, we're going to be flying headings as precisely as we can, so it's important to pay attention to that. Of course, got the aircraft attitude indicator here. And then we've got our speed in knots, and that, of course, a lot of the maneuvers are contract airspeeds. We're trying to hit a particular airspeed target. Our alpha in angle of attack, which matters for maneuvers obviously like the high alpha, but also for some loops. Our Mach number will be important for maneuvers like the sneak and the vertical rolls and the MRT and things like that. And then our G number, which also is important for some loops and also to achieve certain turn rates for some of the maneuvers. So that will be important as well. So let's actually get into the details of this maneuver here. We're about to turn a left 90 degrees for the beam setup. So we'll unpause here. So we're at 4 miles. We're going to make a sharp left turn to the in front of crowd heading. There we go. And then we'll roll out roughly in front of crowd. So when you turn in from 4 miles, you'll be at about 4.5 miles at the point where you are abeam at the airfield. And at this point, I am looking over my shoulder to find the airfield. There it is, right up here. So I know where I am relative to the airfield in the sky. And so I'm not even looking in the cockpit here. Once I know that I'm on speed at 400, and the turn is at full military power, then I'm just looking head out of the cockpit and trying to make sure that I'm in the right spot relative to the airfield so I don't have to maneuver too much once we are at the ingress point. At this point, there are a series of radio calls that will happen between the two pilots. It will start with number 5 when he's in the position he wants to be in, and once I've called 4 miles, Mark, that tells him that I'm turning in, I'm setting up the abeam, and then he asks, let me know when you're abeam. And then I will tell him abeam when I have a sight picture. It looks basically like this. And then he will say, let me know when you take your mark, which means when am I going to turn in? And I will say, go ahead and take it, or just take it, which means I'm turning in. So he knows that it's time to turn in as well. And then he will say, stand by market. And that means from that point on, it should be 10 seconds till we both hit the 4-mile mark. Now, we don't use a stopwatch, but a lot of the other groups do use a stopwatch, and it'll be modded, and you'll see the stopwatch located basically right here. And they're trying to hit that 4-mile distance right at 10 seconds from when 5 calls market. So he will say standby market, which means we're in, ingress starts, and now we're thinking about altitudes, airspeeds, and distances. So here we are, we're turning in, looking over my head a little bit, lining up with the airfield, coming back inside the cockpit, and then I'm looking for 4 miles, so 4 miles mark. So I'm at the 4-mile mark, and then I want to be hitting 400 knots indicated airspeed. So I'm fast here. So I need to whoa this up, and you can see that I know that I'm going too fast, and I've got my speed brake out down here, which you can see, there's the speed brake, it's coming out. So I was a little late on that, but it's coming. All right, so here we are. We're coming in, and I will call at every mile, I will call the distance and the airspeed. And you want to set it up so it's in a cadence. So, and for this particular moment, I will say 4 miles mark 420, which means I am at 4 miles on the moment I say the word mark, and I'm flying 420 knots indicated. So I'm a little fast, I'm going to have to slow it down. He knows I'm trying to peg 400 knots at each mile all the way in. So he knows that I'm going to be trying to slow down from here. But he also knows that I'm going a little fast so that I'll be a little bit ahead of where I should be. So he might need to pick up speed. Now, again, trying to sight the airfield, make sure that the lineup is correct. You can see here on the heading tape, I'm flying 064, which is exactly the heading I need to be. And if we zoom in a little more, you can see there's the center point here. It's an artificial center point that I've set up just for these tutorials. It's a crossed set of Jersey barriers, but that's where we're gonna cross. So I'm at the right heading. You can see I'm at the right airspeed. I'm a little high. I'm going to need to descend to 200 feet, but we got time. We're at 3.25 miles rather. And so, yeah, this is a pretty good setup so far. This is a good ingress. After the 4-mile call, when I call 4 miles mark, then number 5 will indicate what maneuver we're in for it. He'll say 5's in for the right knife edge. And that call means that he's in, meaning he's ingressing. Number 5, that's who he is. For the right knife edge, meaning it's the knife edge maneuver, and the spacing is to the right. So I need to set up to the right of his jet, which means probably to the right of center point. And you can actually barely see him on the horizon out there, right there. So he's setting up his ingress as well. So I'm looking to be just to the right of him for the hit. And to perform the knife edge maneuver. And so when he calls 5's in right knife edge, I will then reply 6 is in right knife edge. Or sometimes you'll use your call sign. So his is chariot, so it'll be chariot's in right knife edge. Or in my case, I'm brother Leb, so I'll say Leb's in right knife edge. And that will come in between the 4 mile call and the 3 mile call. So we're hitting 3 miles, Mark 402, descending to 200 feet AGL, 2 miles, Mark 401. And at this point, you can see I'm a little low, so I'm going to level the wings. I happen to know that Chariot flies a little low typically, so I'm kind of accounting for that. But I should, if I'm doing my job right, I should be hitting 400 knots, 200 feet, 064 all the way in. At least from the 2 mile mark, especially because you remember the Showbox starts 1 mile from center point. So we're getting pretty close to the Showbox. All right, so we're at 2 miles, we're on speed, basically on altitude, on heading. This is a good setup. And I will also typically here at the 1.5 mark, I might give him what's often called a sugar call, which is just an additional radio call to help him out and give him extra confidence that the setup is working. So I might call 1.5 to let him know this is where I am, so that we're right on, and so he'll be able to judge his distance. 1.5 is not necessarily always called. It's not a necessary thing, but it's helpful. So that's a good sugar call to give to help number 5 make sure that his timing is right. At this point, I'm paying attention to my lineup, my altitude, and I'm just listening for his calls because he's going to talk me on the whole way. Number 5's got the lead, and he will talk me on for the rest of the maneuver. Right around 1 mile, number 5 will call smoke on. So let's see whether that happened. 2 mile, there's 9, and there we go. Smoke is on. So yep, our smoke is on. And the purpose of turning smoke on is so that we can gain visual contact with one another. So you can kind of barely see it out there in the distance. But because Chariot has started his smoke, you can see right here, he's got his smoke on, which is a little easier to see against the background. But we won't have smoke on for the maneuver itself. Number 5 will call smoke on, and then number 6 will turn on his smoke. And then as soon as one or the other pilot spots the other one, they will call contact, which means they have visual contact with the opposing pilot. When both pilots call contact, that's the cue for both pilots to extinguish smoke. Chariot likes to give the additional call smoke off to remind us, but we're supposed to smoke off on the contact call from the opposite pilot. In order for this maneuver to look right, in order for it to look like the two jets are passing one another nose to nose or even passing through one another, number 6 actually has to be just probably 20 feet higher than number 5 because the crowd, if you'll remember, the crowd are all going to be down here in bleachers and standing and with their little folding chairs and stuff. And that means the angle that they're viewing the show at is not straight. They're looking up. And because they're looking up, you need to be a little bit above number 5 in order for the parallax to look right. So from there on, we're just waiting for his call. We're trying to fly straight level on speed, and then he will call ready, hit it to initiate the maneuver. And I'm expecting the maneuver hit to come pretty soon because we're at the half-mile mark, and I'm actually going to slow us down a little bit so we can take it one step at a time. All right, so here we are. He's going to call ready, hit it. And as soon as he does, we're going to do what's called a yug. So you can see that my nose is coming up because I'm going to pull just real quickly back stick to about 1.5, 2 degrees, and then neutralize the controls. The purpose of that is to get the jet to become weightless. It's got 1 G on it when it's flying straight and level. And if you pop the nose up a little bit and then neutralize the controls, it's sort of like going over the top of a roller coaster, or if you've ever been in a plane that levels off very quickly, you can feel yourself rise up in the seat because you've got less than the force of gravity on you. And so the idea is that you're going to make the jet weightless so that it rolls more quickly so you can get up on that knife edge. So we've yugged, and then we're going to roll onto our left knife edge here, and as soon as we're on the left knife edge, I'm going to give a full boot of right rudder. And the reason for that is because the jet is going to want to fall, and so the rudder keeps the jet more or less level on the horizon. Let's see if we can get a good look at that. Yeah, so we've got the center line of the jet. I'm actually a little nose high here, is basically on the horizon line, and doing the right rudder will help us to achieve that. You can also notice that I've actually overrolled a little bit. I'm probably at like 93 degrees, and if you're gonna go over in one direction or another, it's probably better to go under, to a little under roll it, so that way you won't descend very much in the middle of the maneuver. We roll towards one another so that we can maintain visual contact with the other jet throughout the maneuver. It's much less dangerous that way. If we rolled away from one another, we might lose sight, and there's a possibility that we would still be on conflicting flight paths. But when we roll toward one another, we are able to maintain visual contact, and that's a much safer way to fly the maneuver. That does require that there will be a little bit of push once we are on the knife edge to keep from flying into one another, because when you're on the knife edge, all of your lift is going the same direction your wings are facing, which is up, and so that means it'll tend to pull you into the other pilot. So you'll need a little bit of push, a little bit of forward stick deflection in order to stay on the correct heading. So as soon as we pass number 5, and he'll be directly over our head, let's see if we can find him. He might have already gone by. Oh, there he is. Yep, he's a little hard to see. He's behind the canopy rail, but he's right here. So in this track file, he's a little late, but that's because we're doing the timing based on his track file. And there's just a little bit of delay because of latency of the internet and the sim. And so the timing was good on his track file, which is why we use this. But we can see that he's there. We know we're safe. We can see him. And as soon as he passes over us, and I'm usually not watching him during this maneuver, I'm staying focused on my HUD and performing the maneuver, then we will roll back out, wings level, and then we will wait. We will call clear once we are wings level, which means I've exited the maneuver. I've completed the maneuver, and I'm clear of any possibility for conflicting with another pilot, and that tells him that I'm good, I'm safe. And then when he hears my clear, then he will call standby roll, which is the signal to perform a clearing turn for the maneuver. Now let's remember the clearing turn, we're clearing on that heading, that 30 degrees right heading. So that's 30 degrees off of the heading that I'm flying currently, the crowd left heading of 064. So I'm looking for a 094 in the turn. So I will be rolling 45 degrees to the right, pulling hard to get to 094 on the heading tape, and we're rolling out wings level and about 20 degrees nose high. Let's speed back up. So we're on our wing, pull to 94, overshot it a little bit, and then once I am wings level, I will be listening for number 5's next call, which is standby roll, at which point we will roll inverted. And then I will listen for his next call after that, which is standby roll, at which point we will roll 270 degrees to the left to end up on the left knife edge again. Then I will call clear, and he will give his final call, roll, which is the indication to roll back wings level for the clear. And then that is the end of the clear. That is a full clearing sequence. So a standard show clear in front of crowd is roll 45 degrees and pull to 30 degrees away from crowd, level the wings, then roll inverted, then roll 270 degrees to the left knife edge or the right knife edge if you're flying crowd right, and then roll back wings level for the clear. And then we level the nose and then establish the crowd left head. And in this case, I'm again cheating out a little bit because I know that this maneuver we end up pretty close to the show line. And so if I'm too close laterally to the show line, it's going to be hard to set up the next beam setup, and I'll have to pull harder and use more throttle in order to maintain the position and the timing that I want. So I'm giving myself a little extra margin going into the next maneuver. So anyway, that's the entire maneuver right there. It's really not too hard. And when performed correctly, it looks great. All right, let's put it all together. This is from a show we recently recorded at Kobaletti, and while no pass is perfect, this is a pretty good example of the knife edge pass at full speed with full comms. Let's check it out.
4 miles mark.
Let me know when you're abeam.
Labs abeam.
Let me know when you're ready to take a mark.
Take it.
Stand by, mark it.
Four miles mark. 430.
Cherry's in for the right knife edge.
Labs in right knife edge. 3 miles mark. 400. Two miles mark. 400.
Smoke on. Contact.
Product.
Smoke off. Ready, hit it. Cherry's clear.
Clear.
Smoke off. Roll and pull. Stand by, roll. Stand by, roll. Stand by, roll. Cherry's clear. Roll. And Cherry's clear and clearing in front of the crowd for the opposing inverted to inverted rolls. 2.2 mark. State.
And that's how the Legacy Blue Solos perform the knife edge pass. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel, where you can find full side-by-side show sequences and debriefs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the flight line.